Please pray with me. May these words that I speak be grounded in my soul, encouraged by the God presence in me. And may these words that you hear be captured by your soul, enlivened by the God presence in you. Amen. 8 months ago, writing the liturgy for the Advent song, Gloria, the song we've been singing as the candles have been lit for 3 weeks now. As I was writing that, I felt compelled, deeply compelled, to create a verse for justice rather than joy. Joy is the traditional Advent word for the third or fourth Sunday. But for me, joy has always been a bit of an awkward fit with hope, peace, and love. And this is because I see joy as a byproduct of the others, that we experience joy when the deeper feelings of hope and peace and love are embraced. So justice became my focus, a way of being in the world that feels daily increasingly more important. And then Friday, just this past Friday, I received an email from Juanita Austin, a former colleague and minister at Sicamous United, and she writes, "Hi Jim, as I settle down to write Sunday's message, I just wanted to let you know how grateful I am for your Advent liturgy, and in particular for choosing justice over joy for this Sunday. Particularly with the news of Trump's latest asinine declaration, Re Jerusalem. My heart is angry and aching. I appreciate being able to genuinely lean into your words." Those words, which were sung by the choir this morning, were, "Though deep discrimination infects the world we know, and mindless degradation disrupts creation's flow, yet still a light is shining, a light of justice burns, to warm each heart that opens, and for compassion yearns." The challenge comes, however, in how we define the word justice. Linking the word justice only with our judicial system, which is more designed to punish than rehabilitate, and then claiming that justice is served in that punishment, is a very weak and poor understanding of the real nature of justice. As I thought about what I might say about justice today, I remembered a critical turning point in my own understanding of the meaning of justice that occurred way back in 1992. And it was during my theological studies. I had the tremendous privilege, truly a privilege, of attending an ethics course at St. Stephen's College in Edmonton. And the lecturer was Carter Hayward. Carter Hayward is a lesbian, feminist theologian, activist, writer, and Episcopal priest. She was one of the notorious Philadelphia 11. I don't know if you heard about them, but it was 11 women in Philadelphia that pushed back in 1974 for ordination, that finally caused the Episcopal Church, which is the equivalent in the US of the Anglican Church, to recognize female priests in 1976. I went back to her book that she used as the basis of those lectures, which was called Touching Our Strength. It's still on my bookshelf. There's not many from my theological days that are still on my bookshelf, but that one is. And it had just been newly published then, 25 years ago, and I reread her definition of justice. And she writes, "The pattern of the sacred in our life together is justice. The shape of God is justice. The movement of the holy in our common life is toward justice. But what is justice? And so she continues. I invite you to think beyond the images of jurisprudence and legalism, often associated with justice in patriarchal endocentric society, into a realm of radical relationality. Radical relationality. In this realm, justice is right relationship. And right relation is mutual relationship. In a mutual relationship, both or all people are empowered to experience one another as intrinsically valuable. Irreplaceable earth creatures, sources of joy and love and respect in relation to one another. It is the shape of God in our life together and in our lives as particular selves in relation. I think it has more power for me today than it had 25 years ago. Injustice, by definition, then, becomes the many places where relationship is not mutual, where both or all people are not empowered to experience themselves or the other as intrinsically valuable. From this perspective, it seems to me that injustice is rampant and pervasive in many personal relationships, in families, in faith communities, in societies, and among nations. We need to recognize injustice and respond by returning to mutual relationship if we are to bring justice in our lives and ultimately to our world. Trump's asinine, as Juanita said, decision to proclaim Jerusalem the capital of Israel only further disempowers Palestinians and further diminishes exponentially the possibility of mutual relationship between Palestine and Israel. The Syrian civil war began because of the injustices perpetrated by Bashar al-Assad on his own people. The regime did not recognize the intrinsic value of their own people, their own citizens. Here in Canada, we continue to perpetuate injustice on our Indigenous sisters and brothers because our policies too often suggest that these people are less valuable than other Canadians, and mutual relationship becomes compromised. And the growing number of sexual abuse and harassment allegations that have filled the news the last few months, perpetrated by men in positions of power, have brought light to the painful injustice experienced by women and some men. Injustice rooted in a belief that some lives are of less or no value. I could go on, but I think you see the pattern. The reality is that the end of injustice in our lives and in our world will never be the result of punishment of the perpetrators only. That will not bring justice. Rather, the real work, our real work, is to change the hearts and minds of all people, particularly people in positions of power, to see the intrinsic value of every other life, and to build mutual relationship with each other and all others. In our scripture reading this morning, the prophet Isaiah proclaims that someone will come to challenge injustice. It is the reason that we have Advent as we await this one that will come to challenge. And Luke, as Jim mentioned, has Jesus speak these very same words very early in his ministry as he returns to his hometown of Nazareth. And as the story goes, after he spoke those words, he was run out of town. It seems to me that in the Christian church, we have missed completely the implication of Isaiah and Jesus' message. we have spent 2,000 years thinking that Jesus alone will release the captives, the oppressed, and bring an end to injustice. So we have chosen to worship him for this and leave him to do the work. But that isn't what Jesus did, or even said he would do. Rather, he said, I have come to proclaim release to the captives. I have come to proclaim. Jesus obviously didn't wave a magic wand and bring justice to a hurting world. If that were the case, we would be living in a very different world now. No, he was pointing to what could be and saying that every single human being must take responsibility, must pay attention to, and see the places of injustice and work towards building mutual relationships. It begins with me, and it begins with each of you. In the story I told the children this morning, Zero saw herself as less than. And initially, rather than embracing her own value, she tried to become something else, anything else. I'll try being 1, I'll try being 7, I'll try being 8 or 9. She felt disempowered. And it took another to see her value, to say that it is what's inside that counts, and empower her. She began to see herself in a new light, not empty or less than, but open and of value. And that moved her into mutual relationship with all the other numbers. Not the same as any of them, but equally as valuable. The result, by the end of the story, was exponential relationship. So where do we begin to create mutual relationship, to grow justice in our lives and in our world? And I return to Carter Hayward for this, who proclaims. She actually used that word when she said this line, that it begins and ends with integrity. Integrity. She says, integrity is a relational blessing given as we become centered at home and in the particularity of who we are. To live with integrity, we live with others. We are for ourselves and for others. In fact, the more we are genuinely for others, the more we are authentically ourselves. And the more we are for ourselves, the more we are for others. It's all about the relationship. It is this way of being with deep integrity that Jesus lived so fully, that caused him to proclaim the time of freedom for all, human and other than human, and to challenge us to do the same. And so in the words of Carter, the pattern of the sacred in our life is justice. The shape of God is justice. May we open our minds and hearts to really see what it means to live with deep compassion so that justice may reign.